It's really about my wife." Roger Taylor said it almost casually, no dramatic pause, no attempt to make the sentence sound like a confession. At 77, after more than half a century of being photographed as one of rock music's great handsome troublemakers, he had written a love song. And when someone asked who it was about, Roger simply pointed toward the woman already beside him. Serena. That answer is more interesting than it sounds, because if you remember Roger Taylor in the 1970s, this is probably not the ending you would have predicted. There was a period when Roger did not need to explain why women noticed him. Queen's own current biography still describes him as the band's resident poster boy, which is unusually restrained language if you look back at the photographs. Long blonde hair, narrow face, that slightly bored expression young men sometimes wear when they already know people are looking at them. And Roger enjoyed being a rock star. He has never worked especially hard to pretend otherwise. Years later, when The Guardian asked whom he would most like to apologize to, his answer was not philosophical. All my former girlfriends. Then they asked what love felt like. His answer was stranger. It comes in flashes. Fleeting. That was Roger at 72, not 22. Even then, he described love as something that arrived in moments rather than something permanent. He joked about sex, admitted his wife thought he drank too much red wine, and named his first proper teenage kiss when asked about the best kiss of his life. You could easily build a familiar story from that. Rockstar gets older, wild man finally settles down, wife changes him. I don't think that quite explains what he has just said, because Roger did not describe Serena as the woman who rescued him from his past. He described something less dramatic. Time. On August 12, 2026, he released I See You Now. When explaining the song, Roger said he and his wife had been together for quite some time, and that when you first know somebody, you don't really see everything about them. Only later, after years, apparently, do you reach the point where you think, "Oh, I see you now." That is a peculiar thing for a 77-year-old former heartthrob to say. Not, "I fell for her immediately." Not, "I always knew." Almost the opposite. He is saying that love became clearer slowly. Maybe that sounds obvious if you have been married for decades, but think about the life Roger came from. Everything around him once moved quickly. Cities changed overnight. Women entered photographs and disappeared from later ones. Queen albums arrived, tours followed, hotels blurred together. There was always another room, another party, another face. And now the song is about noticing one person more clearly because she stayed. There's another small detail I like. Serena did not merely inspire the song, she helped make the video. The film for I See You Now is deliberately restrained, mostly black and white, and was created by Serena alongside Roger's longtime collaborator, Simon Lupton. Roger stands inside a love song about finally seeing his wife more clearly, while his wife is partly responsible for how we see him. That almost feels too neat, except they have worked around each other before. Years earlier, when Serena acted in the independent film Solitary, Roger helped produce the movie and wrote music for it. Asked whether he gave his wife acting advice, he laughed at the idea. He said he would not dare step onto her territory. That comment tells you more than a grand declaration might. Roger Taylor, a man accustomed to enormous influence, knew there was a part of Serena's life where his opinion did not automatically belong, and perhaps that is where this story really starts. Not with which woman Roger loved most. That question is almost too simple. The more interesting question is why a man who once described love as fleeting has now written a song about what happens when somebody remains long enough for the illusion to wear off, and you decide you like what you finally see. The difficult part is that Serena did not arrive at the beginning of Roger Taylor's romantic life, not even close. By the time they met, Roger had already lived through relationships, children, separation, fame, temptation, and the strange distortion that happens when millions of people know your face, but very few know what you are actually like at home. That history matters, because otherwise Serena becomes too easy to explain. The final wife, the woman who won. Real life is not that tidy. Before Serena, there was Dominique Bayron. Roger met Dominique in the 1970s, during the years when Queen was becoming enormous. They had 2 children together, Felix and Rory, and eventually married in 1988. But by then, something had already changed. Roger was in another relationship. That detail makes the marriage sound almost impossible to understand from the outside. Why marry when the relationship was already ending? Celebrity lives sometimes produce arrangements that look absurd when reduced to one sentence. There were practical reasons, family considerations, children, years of shared history. Whatever the private logic, Roger and Dominique did not continue as a conventional married couple. Then came Debbie Leng. She was a model, and the two remained together for years. They had 3 children, Rufus, Tiger Lily, and Lola. This is where the public image becomes complicated. Roger was not simply moving from one glamorous woman to another for photographs. These relationships created families. Children remained after romances changed. Former partners did not disappear from the emotional map simply because the newspapers moved on. And I think that matters when people ask who someone loved most. Love at 25 does not behave like love at 55. Sometimes it is louder, sometimes more selfish. Sometimes you confuse attraction with permanence because nobody has yet forced you to learn the difference. Roger himself has never presented his romantic past as spotless. That answer about apologizing to former girlfriends says enough. You do not say that unless there are memories you know could have been handled better. Still, he rarely turns those memories into public confession. No long apology tour. No dramatic autobiography built around naming who hurt whom. Mostly jokes, fragments. A sentence here, another years later. That may actually tell us something about him. He seems more comfortable acknowledging imperfection than explaining it. And then, Serena entered his life. They had been together for several years before marrying in 2010. Roger was already in his 60s. That changes the emotional equation. There is less illusion available at that age. Both people arrive carrying evidence, past relationships, children, habits that are difficult to hide, opinions that have hardened. The charming version of yourself has had decades to be tested. You cannot really pretend to be uncomplicated anymore. Perhaps that is why I See You Now feels different from a young man's love song. It is not about discovery in the romantic sense. It is about recognition. You stay long enough to see the irritating parts, the difficult days, the repetitions, the things that were attractive at first and later become exhausting. And then, somehow, the person becomes clearer instead of smaller. That is not the kind of love Roger Taylor was famous for in the 1970s. Maybe that is precisely why he chose to sing about it now. There is a photograph of Roger Taylor from the mid-1970s that almost explains the problem. Blonde hair falling around his face, cigarette in hand. That expression somewhere between amused and unreachable. He looked like someone people would project things onto. And they did. For young women in the 1970s, Roger was not simply the drummer in Queen. He was often treated as the beautiful one, the approachable one, the one whose face appeared in bedroom posters almost as often as Freddie's appeared on stage. That kind of attention can make romance strangely unreal. Imagine trying to understand whether someone likes you when fame has already entered the room before you do. Are they attracted to Roger or to Queen, or to the version of Roger they have seen in magazines? At first, perhaps even he could not always know. That is why I keep coming back to the phrase, "I see you now." It sounds simple until you place it beside a life built around being seen incorrectly. Roger has spent more than 50 years being watched. Audiences watched him play. Photographers watched him leave clubs. Fans watched relationships from the outside. The press watched for excess. And because the image was so easy to understand, blonde rock star, successful, surrounded by women, people rarely needed a more complicated version. Sometimes the easiest story survives the longest. But Serena came later, much later. By then, Roger had already experienced what happens when relationships stop being exciting stories and become shared history. Children grow up. Former partners remain connected through birthdays and family decisions. A romantic choice made at 30 can still be sitting across from you at a wedding decades later. You cannot simply edit those chapters out. And maybe that is what maturity eventually teaches people who once lived very quickly. The past does not disappear. it just becomes quieter. Roger and Serena married in August 2010. No enormous royal-style spectacle. No attempt to rewrite his earlier life, as though nothing serious had happened before her. She entered the story knowing there had been other chapters. That matters, because some relationships begin with the fantasy that you are meeting a blank page. At 60, nobody is a blank page. You are meeting someone already annotated. Roger had children, old relationships, habits, a public reputation, friendships stretching back decades, and a career that could still pull him away for long periods. Serena had her own life as well. Maybe that is why Roger's recent description of love feels unusually adult. He does not say that seeing everything makes someone perfect. He says that over time, you begin to see more. There is a difference. You see the difficult parts too. The moods, the silences, the things that annoy you, and yet the relationship remains. I think older viewers understand that instinctively. The romantic songs we hear when we are young often promise that love means discovering someone extraordinary. Older love sometimes asks something less glamorous. Can you still choose this person after they become familiar? Can you remain curious after surprise is gone? Roger Taylor, of all people, now seems interested in that question. The man once famous for being noticed has written a song about finally learning how to notice someone else. And maybe that is the real shift. Not that he stopped being a rock star, that part never completely went away. It is that, at 77, the most revealing thing he can say about love is not who turned his head first. It is who remained long enough for him to finally see clearly. There is something almost private about the way Roger talks about Serena now. Not secretive, just quieter. That is unusual when you remember the world he came from. Queen was never built around understatement. Even Roger's drums were enormous. The concerts became larger, the lights brighter, the parties more famous. For years, excess was part of the scenery. Yet when he explains, "I see you now," he does not reach for a grand phrase. He talks about gradually understanding someone, that is all, and perhaps that is exactly why the song feels more personal. Roger and Serena had already spent years together before marrying in 2010. By then, there was no need to pretend that attraction alone could carry a relationship indefinitely. They had seen ordinary days. That sounds insignificant until you think about how rarely rock star mythology allows ordinary days to exist. There are photographs of premieres, concerts, yachts, celebrations. There are fewer photographs of a Tuesday morning when one person is irritated and the other knows why before a word is spoken. But that is probably where Roger's recent statement really belongs. Not on a stage. Inside familiarity. Serena has also appeared beside him professionally, without becoming part of the Roger Taylor publicity machine. She has acted. She has worked creatively. She helped direct the video for the very song he wrote about her. And there is a small tension in that which I find revealing. Roger spent decades being the person other people watched. This time, Serena was helping decide how Roger would be seen. The video is mostly black and white, restrained. No attempt to recreate the young Queen drummer surrounded by screaming fans. He is older, you can see that. Nothing is trying to hide it. Maybe that matters too. Because the subject of the song only works if time is visible. You cannot sing convincingly about finally understanding somebody after years together while pretending those years never touched you. Roger's face carries them. So does Serena's. And perhaps that is why his explanation contains no embarrassment about age. He is not trying to say, "Look, I can still feel what I felt at 25. He seems to be saying something almost opposite. I understand something now that I probably could not understand then. There is a difference between wanting someone and knowing someone. Most people learn that slowly. Some never do. Roger's younger life certainly gave him enough opportunity to confuse the two. Beauty opens doors. Fame opens more. Attention can make desire feel like evidence that you are loved. But attention is temporary by design. Someone applauds, someone leaves. Another person arrives. Then one day there is no audience involved, just two people who have already seen each other tired, difficult, impatient, worried, ridiculous. And they stay. That kind of relationship does not photograph as well. Maybe that is why we hear less about it. Roger once described love as arriving in flashes. I keep thinking about that line, because "I see you now" almost sounds like the older answer to it. Perhaps love still comes in flashes, but after enough years the flashes begin connecting. You see more of the person between them, and at 77, Roger Taylor appears less interested in telling us who once excited him most than in acknowledging the woman who was still there when excitement had to become something else. Maybe the title of the song says more than Roger intended. I see you now. Not I found you. Not I need you. Not even I love you. I see you. That is a very different sentence. It suggests that the person was there before the understanding arrived, and perhaps that is the part of Roger Taylor's story that feels most honest at 77. He has known attraction. He has known attention. He has known the strange privilege of being desired by people who did not really know him. He has also known relationships that became families, and families that remained even when the romance changed shape. So when Roger talks now about finally seeing someone clearly, the phrase carries weight because of everything that came before it. Not because Serena erased the past. She didn't. Dominique still belongs to his story. Debbie still belongs to his story. His children do too. Nothing meaningful disappears simply because another relationship lasts longer. That is why I would be careful with the easy phrase, the love of his life. It sounds final, almost competitive, as though every relationship can be placed on a table and judged. Real lives resist that. Roger's life certainly does. But there is something he is saying now that he did not seem particularly interested in saying when he was younger. Duration matters. Familiarity matters. Seeing someone after the charm has worn thin matters. And Serena is the person standing inside that realization. By the time they married, Roger had already lived enough to know that excitement can lie to you. It can feel permanent while lasting 6 months. It can make people promise things they do not understand yet. The quieter test comes later. What happens when nothing new is happening? When nobody is watching? When you already know the story they are about to tell? When irritation is more familiar than mystery? Do you still look? That question sits underneath I see you now. And perhaps Roger's answer is yes. There is one image I keep returning to. Not a photograph from Queen's wildest years. Not Roger behind a massive drum kit. Not a backstage picture with champagne and people crowding around him. The image is simpler. Roger, older, performing a song about Serena, while Serena helps shape the film around that performance. She is not merely the subject being observed, she is behind the image too. That feels strangely appropriate. For decades, women were often part of the visual mythology surrounding rock stars. Girlfriends beside cars, partners at parties, faces attached to another chapter in a famous man's life. Here, the dynamic shifts slightly. Serena is not simply being presented as Roger Taylor's wife. She is helping present Roger Taylor. Small difference, big meaning. Maybe that is what being known looks like after enough years. The power stops belonging entirely to one person. You influence how each other moves through the world. And the people watching from outside rarely see exactly where one person ends and the other begins. Roger still tours. He still records. He still looks unmistakably like someone who spent his entire adult life inside rock music. That identity has not softened into something unrecognizable. But at 77, he appears willing to let another version exist beside it. A husband saying, quietly, that he finally understands the woman he married. Not completely. That would probably be dishonest. Nobody completely understands another person. Maybe that is why I See You Now feels more convincing than I Know Everything About You. There is humility in it. You spend years with someone and discover that knowing them is not a task you complete. It keeps changing. The person changes. You change. Then one afternoon you notice something that was probably there all along. Older viewers may recognize that better than anyone. Sometimes the person who mattered most was not the person who created the loudest beginning. It was the person whose presence became so familiar that you almost stopped noticing how much of your life had grown around them, until something makes you look again. A photograph, an anniversary, a song. Roger Taylor wrote his, and perhaps that is as close as he will ever come to answering the question directly. Who did he love most? I'm not sure Roger would phrase it that way, But after all the noise, all the years, all the different versions of love he lived through, the woman he chose to write about at 77 was the one still beside him. And maybe the more interesting question is not whether Serena became the great love of Roger Taylor's life. Maybe it is whether he only understood what that meant after enough of that life had already passed.